Okay. So, I recorded a whole prediction video, a quality prediction video, with my anonymous friend. Only to find that, because I didn't have enough storage on my 512 gigabyte phone, the file was immediately erased. And, because of that, you know, I have to record one alone for the first time ever. I don't know where to look. Oh. There. Or maybe not. I don't know. Listen, here's what's gonna happen. Since it's basically the morning of the event. There we go. I can't believe that happened. Such a quality video that was recorded also. Oh wow, look, I just put my phone in front of the tabs that I actually need to see. Alright, look. It's UFC 314, and, we're gonna go through all the fights, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So, fuck it, let's go. Nora, like, how the fuck does this happen? The fucking file just, oh my god. Anyway, Nora Cornolle versus, versus Hailey Cowan. Alright, Hailey Cowan is not very effective as a fighter or human being. 7-3. She won a split decision on the Contender Series. Went on to lose to Jamie Horth, who's you know, a Jamie Horth. What about Jamie Horth? Jamie Horth is known to be on either side of split decisions. She's pretty but she herself is pretty terrible. Nora Cornolle is just better everywhere. She missed weight, but it doesn't really matter. Because, why doesn't that matter? It doesn't matter because, it's not really going to matter. She's stronger, you know, her ability to, create forward pressure, and I do actually mean that, create forward pressure. I'm not just, like, mumbling and stuttering. She was in UAE Warriors, which is getting pretty respectable as a fight promotion, and, you know, no Contender Series, like, bridge to the UFC. She was just signed. She won her first fight, against Jocelyn, I believe Jocelyn Edwards. That's a actually impressive opponent to have as her first, and she won by unanimous decision. She went on to knock out Melissa Mullins, and lost a very close split decision recently to Jacqueline Cavalcanti. She's just better everywhere. Nora Cornolle. She will win that fight. Tresean Gore versus Marco Tulio. So Tresean Gore is in fact a very good grappler. Especially in the clinch. He one of my favorite people, Antonio Tricoli, was forced to beg for his life when Tresean Gore was allowed to physically attack him. He has another win over Josh Friend, which is, not, those two are not the best of competition, but oh my gosh. Basically, Tresean Gore is somewhat formidable, though he was knocked out by Cody Brundage 3 years ago, and before that, he actually put up a fight against Brian Battle. The Brundage knockout is rough. His competition since has not been great, but he's done a good job. I don't think he has a chance against Marco Tulio, who is going to basically knock him out. Tulio came off the Contender Series. He dusted up not Ilia Topuria, wow. I wish they would let a middleweight lose in Topuria. No, they, I'm sorry, Marco Tulio, yeah, he, Eor Petaria just really, really can't catch a break, but yeah, no, after a second round knockout on the Contender Series, his second Contender Series fight, his first, he won by unanimous decision. He was signed, on the, Darren Rivas card, where I also locked him, as I am doing for this card. He, debuted against Petaria, and he knocked him out in 3 minutes and 4 seconds. His fights before that in LFA, were definitely noteworthy. No serious opponents. Mainly 0-1 and 0-2 opponents. But his first fight in the octagon, was enough for me to have him, as a lock confidently against Tresean Gore. I don't think he's gonna allow Gore to clinch with him. Marco Tulio has a way of striking with power while staying fixed and not overcommitting the way that, a lot of fighters tend to. He can strike with a lot of power while, essentially, not gassing himself too early, which, middleweights like this, that, tends to be something you would worry about, but, Tresean Gore doesn't have a chance, I don't think. I think Tulio is a lock. Oh god, I can't believe I have to do this video over by myself. Such a quality video I have. Sumudaerji versus Mitch Raposo. Mitch Raposo was one of 3 fighters who lost by split decision when they should have lost by vast unanimous decision on UFC 302. The other 2 being Cesar Almeida against Roman Kopylov and Paulo Costa against Sean Strickland. Mitch Raposo is undeserving of a UFC contract, in my opinion. He has a couple of, regional, knockouts and finishes. He was submitted by Jake Hadley in his one Contender Series fight back in 2021. And then all these years later, after securing a title in against an 0-0 opponent in Cage Titans, not Cage Warriors, not Cage Fury Fight Club, but Cage Titans. After that sterling performance, he was allowed to fight Andre Lima. Andre Lima won that fight clearly. Was given 2 30-27s, and then one judge who, let's say, didn't take the oath of his job particularly seriously, decided to give Mitch Raposo a 29-28. Baffling. Now, his opponent, Mitch Raposo's opponent, Sumudaerji, he has an 8-inch reach advantage, 3-inch height advantage. Why that matters, not to be, Angelo from Prize Picks and quote your stats, but why that matters. He's bigger than Mitch Raposo. He's more powerful. He's coming off a 3-fight losing streak. However, in his last fight, he took Charles Johnson to unanimous decision. Going the distance with Charles Johnson, who did knock out Joshua Van, is definitely impressive. Before that, he was subbed by Tim Elliott, and before that, he was subbed by Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell's chin is since completely, become, a wired together piece of paper mache, but back in 2022, he was a bit of a better fighter. Tim Elliott was as well. And Sumudaerji, he's been in the UFC for a bit. He's lost the competition that he's lost to is respectable. That 3-fight losing streak came after 3-fight win streak. Malcolm Gordon, he knocked out in 44 seconds. Neither of these fighters are particularly the best, but Sumudaerji has a huge edge, and he will win this fight. Sedriques Dumas versus Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. So Sedriques Dumas, he can tend to overcommit. He also doesn't have the kind of knockout power that, you'd expect from somebody who fights the way that he does. The Dennis Tulian fight was similar kind of to Austin Hubbard versus what's his name recently, Medeiros, where it's basically just who's less mediocre. Sedriques Dumas, he did defeat Cody Brundage by unanimous decision. He was submitted by Josh Friend in his debut, which was only 2 years ago. He was decimated by Ruzaboyev, who's the only real fighter that has ever been really put in front of him. The Josh Friend submission doesn't age well. Now, Oleksiejczuk, despite a string of, very, very devastating losses, most reminiscent being the Michel Pereira backflip onto him, which made everyone think that Michel Pereira was, you know, headed straight to the top until Anthony Hernandez, you know, just completely eviscerated him. Now, the thing about Oleksiejczuk is he does have knockout power. And the thing also about him is that though he can tend to overcommit, which can lead to situations like Kyle Barallo submitting him, you know, or, you know, some of his early fights, you know, winding up in compromising positions against, like, Jimmy Crute and Ovince St. Preux, back when they were both good. You know, he, if he catches you, you know, you're in trouble the way Kevin Holland was. Had Kevin Holland not locked up that armbar, Kevin Holland was probably about to get ground and pounded. That was that same 302 card. He also shoved Shar Magomedov around the octagon a bit. And, you know, in a fight that I felt could have honestly gone to him. By him, I mean Oleksiejczuk. That was his most recent fight. He knocked out Chidi and Chikwani. You know, and you know, and I mean, as much as emotion really plays very little of a role in my mind, you know, Oleksiejczuk does need this fight. I think that he's going to be looking for a finish, and, you know, Sedriques Dumas, I mean, you know, I mean, is Oleksiejczuk Ruziboev? No, but he could finish Dumas as fast as Ruziboev did. So for that reason, I'm taking Oleksiejczuk, and I'm locking Oleksiejczuk as well. Darren Elkins versus Julian Erosa. So, Darren Elkins, you know, is 40 years old. You know, he can grapple a bit, but he also has a chin. He was knocked out by Cub Swanson. He lost to Jonathan Pierce 2.5 years ago. He hasn't been the most active, although he did last fall fight Daniel Pineda. You know, got a unanimous decision win. Before that, he also submitted TJ Brown, which is, to be honest, nothing special. But his knockout losses, you know, are, you know, what I'm looking at. Ricardo Lamas, Cub Swanson. I mean, Nate Landwehr couldn't finish him, but, you know, the Jonathan Pierce loss is pretty bad. He also is 40 years old. He's not the striker or grappler that Julian Erosa is. I mean, Julian Erosa can tend to be, you know, hit or miss a bit, but, you know, after his last few fights, you know, submitting Christian Rodriguez, which is very impressive. The Ricardo Ramos submission, also impressive. I don't like the Fernando Padilla loss. The Alex Caceres loss is almost inexcusable, but, you know, Caceres had his day, actually. People forget about that, but I'm not gonna do what people forget, man. Like, I just won't do it. But yeah, no. Erosa knocked out Nate Landwehr. And something else that people tend to forget is that Julian Erosa was once the Paul Craig of featherweight, meaning the only person to ever submit Sean Woodson. You know, why does that make him the Paul Craig of featherweight? Well, because Paul Craig in his day, only person to ever finish or defeat, you know, Ankalaev. Sean Woodson's never taken another loss to this day. I believe that was Woodson's first fight. Same thing with Ankalaev's first fight against Paul Craig. Bottom line is Julian Erosa, though, despite having been knocked out by Alex Caceres as well, and Fernando Padilla, his ability to find submissions, Charles Jourdain fight, and I am going back a little bit, but I mean, he's been fighting a long time, and I don't see any decline. If anything, I think that he has an ability to adjust in the moment. He's 35 years old. He's fighting 40-year-old Darren Elkins. I think that it either goes to decision or Julian Erosa possibly locks up a submission. I think that Julian Erosa's a lock. I think that, there's really nothing Darren Elkins has for him. I mean, he could try to keep it on the feet. He could try to outstrike him. I just don't see... I don't see Elkins finding his chin. I don't see Elkins really being able to, put up much of a fight. I think Erosa has a very unique way of, basically striking defensively and then finding submissions, and and if it becomes a grappling exchange, I think Erosa has the edge. So I think Erosa's going to win. I think he's a lock. Jim Miller versus Chase Hoover. Sucks for Jim Miller, man. He's I mean, he got that submission over Damon Jackson. I think that was first round. Yeah. I mean, Jim Miller's tricky. He just when everybody thought it was all over for him after he was shoved around the ring by His Majesty Bobby Green. He came out and just I think what was it, Damon Jackson took him to the ground and he just converted it into either a guillotine or a rear naked choke. I can't remember. But yeah, Jim Miller, his physical acumen as that slowly declined, his fight IQ has risen, which is what keeps him competitive. But the Gabriel Benitez submission as well. He also stays very active. None of that is going to matter against Chase Hoover, who has improved with every fight. Who's 15 years younger. He's coming off he's a 4-fight win streak. The last 3 of which he's gotten by submissions. The Clay Guida fight was merciless, in the best way possible. The first round of the Borshev fight, he was outstriking him completely. And then by the second round, it was over. Jordan Levitt showed no chance of even surviving. Chase Hoover's really, his only real considerable loss, aside from an early one to Alex Caceres by decision, and Steven Peterson by decision, but, is to Steve Garcia, who did knock him out. That was almost 3 years ago. Since then, he's improved vastly. His ability to strike has also improved vastly. He's got 2 knockouts in the UFC, but his ability to strike and then lock up submissions, get people to the ground, and just completely have his absolute way with them, as he did with Clay Guida. But the Borshev fight was more of just a rhythmic, just beating into submission. Almost like a much shorter version of, Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. So I think, or Leon Edwards. So, for that reason, Chase Hooper it is, and Chase Hooper is going to be a lock. Next fight, Xiaonan versus Virna Jandiroba. I'm taking Xiaonan. This is a very difficult fight to pick. The reason being that Virna Jandiroba is, like, annoyingly difficult when it comes to, her, like, tenacity. And what I mean by that is that Virna Jandiroba, like, she doesn't stop. She basically, she doesn't stop striking, and she also will, she is also looking for submissions. She submitted Amanda Lemos in her last fight. Virna Jandiroba is one of the rare female strawweights that actually is constantly hunting for submissions. Now, that's dangerous, but why I'm taking Xiaonan is partially because of her size. Xiaonan, when she takes somebody to the ground on her terms, there's a strength differential that I think is definitely important. I think that, I think against, I think you saw it against Tabitha Ricci. She also has a lot of power in her striking. She knocked out Jessica Andrade. I think the Mackenzie Dern fight was not nearly as close as, as the majority decision would have you think. And against, Zhang Weili, did outclass her, but, she didn't necessarily make it easy. There's a couple of, there's a couple of fights where, to be honest, her size is something that she uses to her advantage. Her striking, she can strike very, very well. I remember she rocked Angela Hill a lot. Karolina Kowalkiewicz as well. I think she got robbed and split decision loss to Marina Rodriguez. But she was knocked out by Carla Esparza, and this is, I think, prime champion Carla Esparza. But regardless, I don't see Virna Jandiroba. I don't see knocking her out. It's possible that Xiaonan gets Virna to the ground, and Virna, scrambles it into a submission of her own. I just don't see that happening given the way that Xiaonan takes people down. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Xiaonan. Alright. Dan Ige versus Sean Woodson. That's such a good video. Totally erased. Dan Ige versus Sean Woodson. Alright, so Dan Ige is very, very hard to, he's not an easy fighter to beat. Bryce Mitchell struggled very hard. So did Diego Lopez, to be honest. Lerone Murphy. Dan Ige almost beat Lerone Murphy. Now, the thing about Dan Ige, though, is that, though he's never been finished, he has trouble against fighters above a certain caliber. So, yes, he knocked out Damon Jackson. Yes, he knocked out Andre Fili, right? He beat Nate Landwehr. He's been in the UFC for a very long time. He has, he's got, finishes here and there. He won a split decision against Edson Barboza back in 2020, which is definitely impressive. But when it comes to fighters, you know, like a cut above, you know, a cut above like somebody like Damon Jackson or even Nate Landwehr, you know, you're dealing with a more defensive like fighter, the way that Ige is, and you know, he I don't think that he is able to, you know, offensively strike as well. You know, when he is cognizant of his opponent's ability to the degree that he, you know, to the degree that he was against Diego Lopez. I think that, like, I think Lerone Murphy kind of neutralized him, although that was a very close fight. Sean Woodson has a very strange and deceptive way of fighting that seems to evolve with every fight. You know, if you look at the difference between the Dennis Bajukta fight, you know, to the Jourdain, to the Alex Caceres, none of whom he could finish, and then he knocked out Fernando Padilla in one round. Put him on the ground with a leg kick that looked like a flimsy, like, glass, like, just like a long rectangular, like, mirror, like, his legs are, like, ridiculously thin and bony, and the leg kick that put Fernando Padilla on the ground looked like Woodson's leg looked like it would break hitting something, but instead, you know, it somehow had enough power on it to ground Fernando Padilla, and, you know, and that turned into a first round knockout. I think Sean Woodson is a strange individual who has, you know, just developed a very bizarre way of fighting that definitely is threatening. He's the tallest in the division, and, you know, I don't see Dan Ige being able to neutralize it. I think that Dan Ige is gonna survive, but I mean, I say that, but, you know, it's very possible that Sean Woodson's the first to finish him. Just by way of his strange and unorthodox striking, and you know, and you know, I think there's a lot more to be seen from Woodson too. I'm tempted to lock him against Ige, but Ige can surprise you. I mean, like I said, I mean, you know, I locked Lerone Murphy against Dan Ige, and I almost regretted it because of how competitive that was. So I'm not gonna lock that, but I'm gonna say that Sean Woodson definitely wins. Nikita Krylov versus Dominick Reyes. I want Dominick Reyes to be back. I really do. And in a sense he is, but he looked... Now, I mean, there was the rough justice that was issued to Anthony Smith in Dominick Reyes' last fight happened in the second round. In the first round, he looked vulnerable, he looked sloppy, and, I mean, you know, you can't refuse to accept the fact that, you know, he went, you know, he was on a 3-fight knockout loss streak before he finally came back and knocked out Justin Jacoby recently, and followed that up with the Anthony Smith fight. You know, both of which were impressive, but Krylov's a different caliber of opponent. Krylov is, you know, Krylov's the caliber of opponent that basically, you know, that Reyes was getting knocked out by. You know, we're talking about Jan, Yair, and then Ryan Spann, unfortunately. Now, Krylov's been out for a while. He's 2 years younger than Reyes, which only matters because people have talked about his inactivity, right? Think about Nikita Krylov. I mean, you know, his last fight was 2 years ago when he submitted Ryan Spann in the first round. Ryan Spann, who knocked out Dominick Reyes in the first round. Now, MMA math being what it is, that doesn't necessarily say much. Before that, Krylov beat Volkan Ozdemir. A pretty dominant performance. See, I don't know if I would trust Reyes now against Ozdemir, to be honest. You know, and Krylov has knockout power. He also has submission ability. Before that, he knocked out Gustafsson back when that meant something in the first round. Paul Craig also submitted Krylov, along with Jamal Hill and Ankalaev. He did have his day. But yeah, no. It's definitely important to realize how, you know, how many of the best in the division that Krylov's fought. You know, and fought competitively. He fought a very competitive fight against Ankalaev. You know, he lost a narrow split decision to Glover Teixeira back in 2019. He's, you know, he's only 33, meaning that he debuted in the UFC at 20 years old. His second fight was, he knocked out Walt Harris in 25 seconds, which actually at that time mattered. I mean, people, if anyone even remembers Walt Harris, they remember him for, you know, the old, like, domestic difficulties and his, you know, 5 or 6 fight losing streak before he was released from the UFC. This is before that. This is when Walt Harris was, you know, up and coming and definitely somebody that you did not take lightly, because he might kill you in the octagon. Yeah, Krylov knocked him out in less than 30 seconds. He was submitted by Ovin St. Preux in 2014, when once again Ovin St. Preux was in his prime. He later got that back with a second round submission. A few years later, but you know, and then he continued to finish people, including Marcos Rogerio de Lima by submission. Ed Herman, who's better than people remember. But he took a break from the UFC. I forget why. But he was in a promotion called Fight Nights Global, where he fought 4 times, winning every fight, 3 by knockout and 1 by submission. Then he came back to the UFC, fought Jan. He lost to Jan Blachowicz by submission, but got the win back against Ovin St. Preux, fought Glover Teixeira to a split decision, beat Johnny Walker, knocked out Gustafsson. You know, he's up there with some of the best light heavyweights ever, and he's not particularly old. I think that the inactivity doesn't necessarily mean anything. I mean, it's not like he hasn't been doing anything in that time. I think that he's very dangerous. I also think that he fights very smart. I watched back the Ozdemir fight. And yeah, I mean, to compare Carlos Ulberg versus Ozdemir to Krylov versus Ozdemir is, I mean, it's a huge difference. Krylov's a problem for pretty much anyone in the division, I think. Here, hold on, let me see. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, he had, Krylov got Ozdemir down 7 times, almost 10 minutes of control time, submission attempt, and he outstruck him, landed 171 strikes. I mean, he's constantly at work, trying to finish you. I don't know that Reyes' defense is just. I mean, Reyes still. I mean, the Jacoby fight and that first round against Anthony Smith. I mean, Reyes' defense, was semi non-existent until he turned it up in the second round and just attacked harder. That's not gonna work against Krylov, I don't think. Sadly. I mean, I say sadly because I'd love for Dominick Reyes to be back. I mean, but it's gonna be Krylov. So, Bryce Mitchell versus Gene Silva. Sorry, kids. It's gonna be Gene Silva. I'm locking Gene Silva. Now, nobody wants to hear that, except for some people who are realistic. Bryce Mitchell. I would love for Bryce Mitchell to win. I really would. Like, I'll take the hit to, my potential wins. But it just simply isn't gonna happen. Bryce Mitchell, he's an impressive fighter for sure. His grappling definitely speaks for itself. Although, if you actually really look at his record, you see a lot of unanimous decisions, against fighters like Andre Fili, who Dan Ige knocked out very early into the single round. He did beat Edson Barbosa in 2022, but he was himself submitted by Ilia Topuria. He was knocked out, as everyone remembers, by Josh Emmett. He beat Dan Ige, barely. Although you could say the same for Lerone Murphy. Dan Ige is very tenacious. The Chrome Gracie fight was a fight that he was handed. Now, the way that he beat Chrome Gracie was impressive, but against somebody like Gene Silva, who, can basically strike with so much power, who's so fast, and, having fought Drew Dober up a weight class on short notice, and rendering him unable to continue to fight by a doctor's orders. I just, I don't see Bryce Mitchell locking up any kind of submission. I mean, I don't see him getting close enough to, just try to see the fight in your head. I mean, how does it happen for Bryce Mitchell? He's not taking Gene Silva to the ground. He's not taking his back. He's certainly not outstriking him. What I think is going to happen is I think Bryce Mitchell's going to get caught, and I think he's going to get finished honestly in probably the first or second round. If he makes it to a decision, he'll be the first in the UFC to do so against Gene Silva. And Gene Silva will, earn a spot in the rankings, which I think he deserves. And I haven't watched that press conference that made everybody, angry at Gene Silva. Because it's like, why would I? You know what I'm saying? He is the better fighter, and I'm going to lock him against Bryce Mitchell. Sorry, kids. Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. So Patricio Pitbull is another guy who's, from Bellator. He had his day. And, and he's old. He's old, like, I mean, Chandler, you can say the same thing about, you can even say the same thing about MVP, although the move up to 185 against Sharo was great, but let's see him stay there. You know what I mean? MVP, a lot of these guys, they come over and, like, they get these immediate shots at the rankings, and it just doesn't pan out like that. The Jeremy Kennedy fight, which was the most recent fight with Patricio Pitbull, it was what it was. Not unimpressive. But before that, his one Ryzen fight, he was knocked out by Chihiro Suzuki, who, is a champion, but at the same time, that was not a fight for the belt, and Suzuki, Suzuki, I mean, he had no place in Ryzen. I don't think he really, Patricio Pitbull, I don't think he really has a place in the UFC. He lost to Sergio Pettis, which is Anthony Pettis' brother. Before that, he had 3 decision wins leading up to that. He was submitted by AJ McKee and then won a unanimous decision rematch against him, but, I still put Yair's grappling over his. I think that Yair's lankier. I think Yair has, his mind is more focused on, striking into submissions. I think he's all around the better fighter. Whether or not age plays a part, height plays a part. People make a huge deal about, Yair being like brutally finished by Brian Ortega in his last fight. What people forget is that in the first time he fought Brian Ortega, he knocked him out in the first round. He also submitted Josh Emmett, which, not even Ilya Taperia could do. Submission or knockout. Volkanovski did a number on Yair, but, it's Volkanovski, we'll get there. Yair, I think Yair, definitely has the edge in almost every way against Patricio Pitbull. It'll be an interesting fight, but I just think that Patricio Pitbull's aged out. And speaking of aged out, that brings us to co-main event. Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. I've been calling for this fight for over a year. I think that Chandler, along with Gamrot and Beneil Dariush, need to be purged from the lightweight rankings. I think that Chandler, after his debut in the UFC against Hooker, he just went on to, have somewhat exciting fights, the majority of which he lost. Let's see, what is he? He's in the UFC. He's he is 2-4. Charles Oliveira knocked him out in his second fight. The Gaethje fight was, honestly, just a dominant performance by Gaethje. I mean, he knocked out Tony Ferguson, but Gaethje had already done that. And, Ferguson was already a broken shell of what was once a human being. To get that really cool still photo, though, of, Chandler's foot just, like, caving in his face. But, Yeah. I mean, submitted by Poirier. He had Poirier for a little bit, but not so much. And in his last fight, 5-round rematch against Charles Oliveira, he was being taken to school, and then he did have a resurgence towards the end of that fight, which was which was definitely a display of like physical strength and but in the end, Michael Chandler, he doesn't have what I would consider to be anything that's going to stop Paddy Pimblett from striking at range and using what is definitely a better ability when it comes to lateral movement and looking and seeking out finishes. The way I see this fight going basically is that Pimblett strikes at range, finds the right moment to get Chandler to the ground and submits him. And or takes him to the ground and ends it with ground and pound, both of which Chandler has shown himself vulnerable to. I think honestly Pimblett's a lock. After the Bobby Green fight, he's shown himself to be way more dynamic. I think he's deserved this fight for a long time, and it's a 5-round fight. A lot of people are worried about Pimblett's gas tank. I don't think that's necessarily where I think Pimblett finishes him by submission or ground and pound relatively early on. And if not, I also, I just don't, Chandler's just slow. And people have made the same argument against Paddy Pimblett, but I think Pimblett's just better every way. He's not going to stand directly in front of Chandler and eat shots. That would be about the only way that Chandler would win, in my humble opinion. Now, main event. Oh, God. I can't believe I had to re-record this whole video on my own. Main event. Alexander Volkanovski versus Diego Lopez. So, Diego Lopez is a great fighter. Why I think he's going to lose is I think that Diego Lopez is going to be frustrated with Volkanovski. I think, first of all, let me say that Volkanovski, okay, people disregard or just simply don't remember how close Volkanovski came to beating Islam Makhachev in their first fight, right? So, and then in between that and the second fight, came back and just supremely defeated Yair Rodriguez to defend the belt, featherweight belt. And then, I believe on 11 days notice, drinking and, not really thinking about things, pulled himself off the couch to fight Islam in a rematch where he was knocked out brutally. Then about only 4 months later, okay, with nothing approaching the time necessary to both recover and then go through a full training camp, he was knocked out early on in 2013. TKO punches, but regardless. That Islam knockout was the first out cold knockout that he had ever had. Without the time to fully recover and go through a full training camp before fighting Tapuria, they're just, you can't. I mean, I believe that he deserves his day in court rematch against Topuria, even. But regardless of what you think about that, is Volkanovski washed? Is his chin completely ruined? I mean, it's possible. I seriously doubt it. And I think that the way that Diego Lopez and, like, given, you got the same height difference as Holloway versus Volkanovski, and in all three of those fights, all of which Volkanovski won, you saw Holloway having to fight with a bladed stance just to land strikes. I think Diego Lopez is going to have trouble landing with power. I think Volkanovski is going to frustrate him with leg kicks. I think people forget the speed of Volkanovski, though Diego Lopez is not slow. I think Volkanovski is going to be able to land body shots, calf kicks, and eventually get Lopez to the ground on his own terms. Now, Lopez's jiu-jitsu is definitely something to think about, although Volkanovski is very strong. I think that Volkanovski could take this to the ground and end it, with ground and pound. He could also just consistently outstrike Lopez, mix in takedowns that, that timed correctly will land. I think the longer the fight goes, the more that it'll favor Volkanovski. I don't think that Lopez has the ability to finish Volkanovski quickly, or at all, to be honest. And Diego Lopez is a great fighter, but he's not Movsar Evloev, who, should be next in line for a title shot, in my opinion. And who did defeat Diego Lopez. If you think about Evloev versus Volkanovski with a full training camp, and you're probably looking at something similar to the first Islam Volk fight. But yeah, I mean, like I said, Diego Lopez definitely, free eats for Volkanovski? Absolutely not. Am I gonna lock Volkanovski? No, but I think he will win. What happens from there with the division remains to be seen. I think Topuria made a terrible move, relinquishing the belt when he could have done what Volkanovski did, stayed champion and, moved up in an attempt to either hold both belts or even, fight someone in the top 5 at 155. But since it's a division with no champion, it's an interesting fight. And I think that Volkanovski is overlooked a lot because of how Topuria beat him. What I don't think a lot of people pay attention to is that he should never have fought that quickly after the second Islam fight, which he also should never have fought. So yeah. That's what I'm gonna say. And now that I recorded this a second time by myself, first prediction video all by myself, it's actually not that bad, but I'm not gonna do it again because I'm gonna switch phones finally because I've been lazy as fuck about that. And I can't believe that happened. So yeah, I still gotta make a betting advice video. So but don't worry, that'll be short and sweet. right to the point, just in time, and more than enough time for everybody to hopefully not gamble, but you know.